Antrich und Ehre, was ich dir noch angesäche, so bist du sie aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschehen? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab.
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary holy land from the heathen. I'm here today with Dan Baltic.
This is Dan Baltic.
We're also here with a guest today, Kevin Kautzman.
Hey, thanks for having me, fellas. I'm looking forward to this.
Of course, Kevin.
Sure thing. And just to introduce Kevin a bit to anyone out there who may not know him, Kevin's an award-winning playwright and screenwriter. He's originally from North Dakota, lives in St. Paul, Minnesota now. He's got a degree in history and philosophy, but also a MFA in creative writing. And he's the writer of numerous plays, including a fantastic new play called Moderation, which Dan and I watched a recording of a stage reading of in advance of the conversation today. And he's also the co-host of another great podcast called Art of Darkness with Brad Kelly, that on the subject of, what would you say, Kevin, the dark side of creativity, and each week you discuss a different artistic figure and their sort of dark side and how it fueled their work.
Yeah, that's it. It's a podcast about the dark side of creativity, and we just did 2 episodes yesterday. We did like a year one recap with an actor friend of mine, Michael Backinson. He was actually, I think, in the reading Moderation that you saw. He's going to be in the...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah, Michael's amazing. He's an actor living in New York. He's on one of those most recent episodes. We just went over the first year of the podcast to date. He's going to be in the next reading of Moderation, which is in association with the Blank Theater in LA. They do something called the Living Room series, but it's going to be on Zoom this year. So the only living room we'll be in will be whatever you stream it into. That's coming out early in December, and you can look for that at moderationplay.com. And yeah, Art of Darkness is at artofdarkpod.com, and the idea is we do an episode once a month. Each of us takes a turn. So Brad takes a turn, I take a turn. We try to do 2 a month, and we walk through the life of a creative figure, an artist, a writer, somebody who affected culture, and we focus on the dark side of their life, the things that maybe people don't know about or that make you uncomfortable to talk about. So we just did Disney last night with the great Blauergeist. So this weekend is a bit of a podcasting marathon for me. But yeah, here we are.
Godspeed, Kevin.
Yeah.
Godspeed.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, Moderation. We're going to get into it, but we were blown away. That was an awesome play. And, we both have experience watching and reading and writing plays. And it you don't see a lot of plays like that right now these days. So,
well, thank you.
Our hats are off.
Thank you very much. Moderation is a play about social media content moderators losing their minds at work. And it's a bit of a rip from the headlines play, in that if you want to look up social media moderators Facebook lawsuit, you'll find all sorts of information about this. There's a very fine article in The Verge that came out, I think, the year before last, something like that, that went over what was happening to these poor content moderators. And of course, they don't work for Facebook. They work for a contractor that Facebook employs or utilizes, because Facebook, being essentially fraud at scale, this horrific mind control program that should be, we should set it on fire in Minecraft. They lie about everything, right? So one of the things of Facebook is, our average salary is $250,000. Well, sure, if you're employed by Facebook, but they don't talk about the armies of content moderators they employ. And these poor folks were thrown to the wolves and are essentially asked, without any sort of psychological help, without any counseling, without any insight or humanity about what these people would have to be forced to see. It's shades of Clockwork Orange, right? Oh, my job is 8 hours a day to watch the most horrific things that humanity puts online, to see the snuff videos, to see the pornography, the horrific criminal pornography, all of it. And I thought, I had wanted to write that play for a very long time because I'm a very online guy. And one of my earlier plays was about, is about online sex work. It's called If You Start a Fire, Be Prepared to Burn. And that had a production in New York. Oh, yeah, thanks. That's in print from Broadway Play Publishing. So if you want to read that, you can find it. In any case, moderation, the thing that got me to write moderation finally, that got me off my chair and into researching it, which is its own animal. I had an anonymous Twitter account for a long time that eventually got banned. That's a story all its own. But the thing that got me to start writing moderation was a point in one of these stories about the moderators coming to believe the conspiracy theories they were moderating. Yeah. I thought, that's a play.
Absolutely. The thing I wanted to say that really impressed me and just completely engrossed me about moderation was that how much were in your critical crosshairs, so to speak, with it. Because, I would be interested enough in a play that was just about tech censorship or just about the effects of stimulating media, just about the effects of watching that kind of content online. I'd be interested enough in a play that was just about the banality of modern corporate culture and the indignities of modern work. And I would be, content to watch a play that sort of tackled a little bit how, a certain kind of beta white male, so to speak, is sort of being replaced by women. Or by other people who maybe advance a little bit more through means of affirmative action. But your play tackles all of that. So it's an hour and a half watching experience. I was really impressed just how much you were able to tackle in a way that didn't feel at all contrived. I mean, aspects of this play you talk about, there's shades of Clockwork Orange. They're forced to watch horrific content online for a massive corporation. Their eye movements are tracked, all their clicks are tracked. So it's almost like it felt like speculative sci-fi, but I don't know how much of it was science fiction. I think that it's pretty much right from the headlines. I think this kind of stuff is happening, both in tech, tech industry, which is very easy to hate, but probably even other industries as well. This kind of the indignities of the modern workplace. So, you were able to tackle so much in a set of given circumstances that are so real, and then move it towards such a great catharsis as well, which we'll get into. I call it the sort of Paul Schrader style narrative of a certain violence building up in an otherwise passive person. And yeah, that's mostly just the
wow. What did you really think? I really appreciate it when you clearly engaged with the play, and it's all there. So I'm grateful. I only realized after writing the play that it is essentially the dumbwaiter is that play where they're waiting for the next thing to appear on their screens. It was quite funny to realize that, and. That's maybe a short way of saying it maybe feels original, and I hope it certainly feels original, but I am grounded in a theatrical tradition that just owes a lot to the likes of Pinter and Beckett and all the rest of them. So, and I feel like what you're describing, all of those layers and those nuances and things, it's because I love theater and because I'm so familiar with it that I feel like I have the tools and the ability, and I've had many great teachers, and I've been in many great theaters, and it's one of those funny things where you just immerse yourself in this stuff, and it channels through you in a funny way. It's like I don't really feel like I wrote it somehow.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm not being modest. It
No,
just
I know what
feels
you mean.
strange.
We know.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, it feels very, very strange. And I wrote this in the before times. I was living in New York City. Yeah, I was living in New York City, and it's so strange. I've become very active in crypto. I'm very in this. As bad as this might be for my brand, I don't care. I'm very in this Floki crypto, which you're going to hear a ton about.
I saw that, yeah, on your Twitter.
And I became a moderator in the Floki chat. They made me a moderator. I'm a paid moderator in this chat room. So here is a strange case where someone writes this play, and then lo and behold, they're doing the thing. It's very, very odd. I didn't even ask for it. They made, and we don't deal with quite the level of insanity that my characters deal with in moderation. But there are moments where someone will say, "I'm going to kill myself," and we're sitting there in a chat room because they got hacked, or they made a mistake, and we have there are some very special people in Floki chat who need some.
I'm sure.
Yeah, some kid love. So, but it's this strange art meets reality. Like art imitates life, imitates art. So here I am. What a bizarre world. Anyway.
No, for sure. And as you said, you're also very online. And I mean, the corner of Twitter that I guess all three of us are kind of on. Well, we don't have the most horrific stuff that your characters deal with, but in terms maybe some of the 9/11 conspiracy, it's all stuff we're familiar with.
There are three. It's always 3 clicks away.
Right.
Always.
No, that
we
makes
can
sense.
get to some of the darkest stuff on the internet in about 3 clicks, and it is this hovering ghost under everything that's done on the internet. It's very, very strange. It's like there's the Disney internet, there's the Facebook internet, there's grandma posting recipes, and then there's a snuff film, and it's all right there. It's I don't know. We're not equipped to process or to deal with it. And
for sure. I mean, it's interesting how much the internet has changed even in my lifetime, and how much less ostensibly free it's gotten. It's obviously much less of a place of free expression. There's much more policing that goes on in terms of tech censorship and the type of things that your characters engage in with moderation. But at the same time, the dark shit is all there still. It's just more behind the surface, and you can't really expunge it from the internet. All you can do is keep it off of the most public-facing stuff like Twitter and Facebook. So it's like there's this policing attempt that goes on, an attempt to sort of, especially since Trump, I think, in terms of political stuff and stuff in general, perhaps, there's this attempt to control the narrative that emerges online. And I think that the bigger companies and the powers that be have made a lot of strides with regard to that in the last 5 years. But as you point out, the dark stuff, not even the political stuff, but although maybe that could be part of it, but the snuff of it all, and the deranged pornography, like, it's all still there. It's just more covered over. So it's this strange thing where there's more policing, but also like the really toxic shit is still there.
Yeah, it's there, and I think everybody knows that it's there. So it's like this villain outside the room. It's like a shades of like a Friday the 13th movie. Jason's out there. What's going to summon him? We don't know. Very, very strange. And they would have us believe, all of these companies would have us believe that they're in control, right? Because they have to present as if they're in control to keep the advertisers happy. Because at the end of the day, Facebook is an advertising company. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. It's an ad platform. Google, all of them, that's what they do. And I'm an ad man. Don Draper would be working at Facebook or at Google or what. Or Netflix, and so forth. They have to give the appearance of control, but I think one of the muckraking qualities of my play moderation is that, of course, they don't. There is no AI. It's skip logic. It's a big spreadsheet. You're in their spreadsheet. The new Facebook name change is Meta. Well, of course, it's Meta. That's what they want. They want your metadata. By the way, what a Pomo first year grad school trashy name for your company.
Oh,
He's
absolutely.
a boarding school MK Ultra victim who wants to, and no offense if you guys went to boarding school, but he,
No.
Or for MK Ultra victims.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean,
as we all are.
Yeah, we all are. That's one of my central theses. But yeah.
One thing we wanted to ask you about is the writing within the cathedral and writing things that are, for want of a better word, based. I don't think it's, inaccurate to say that moderation is critical of lean-in feminism, is critical of the, indeed, of the cathedral, of this, superstructure of knowledge and promulgation of, fabricated narratives. And this is really, in some respects, I think, a deeply, I'm not going to say reactionary, but it's a right wing, and you could disagree with that, but take on, these topics.
Get my crucifix here.
But being able to write that in such a way that it is still, very much can be digested by mainstream audiences that's a difficult thing. And so, but that is something you need to do as a theater writer, because you cannot produce mainstream entertainment that is not essentially allowable by the cathedral standards. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your process for writing, as Strauss would say, writing between the lines.
Yeah, between the lines is critical, and everything that Matthew was saying earlier about how the play is about all of those things and potentially even more. This is what, as a young writer, you often don't understand, is that I think it's a Miles Davis quote: "The music is the notes you don't play," something like that.
Yeah,
I think it's true of theater and of great writing. It's what's not there. It's what's not stated in addition to what's created. I think Don DeLillo does an incredible job of this. So yeah, it's about, in the theater, it's about writing a blueprint. I would love, hopefully, when we get back to, well, I don't want to say back to normal. There was no normal before. When things open up, I would love to see 10 different productions of Moderation and see 10 different interpretations of the play. And I think a good play does that. And I will say, since we're getting Yarvin pilled here, I will say that I'm with the camp that has decided to call it the regime rather than the cathedral. I attend mass at a cathedral, and a literal cathedral here in St. Paul. And my son will be baptized there soon. And so, just as and you could call it the cathedral. I know exactly what you mean, but I
appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, there was a little bit of discourse that went around, on Twitter, and everybody agreed it's the regime. Let's call it that. But we know what we're talking about, the shorthand of it. And I'm not some sensitive trad calf, so don't like.
No, I get what you're saying. I may adopt that.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, maybe we should actually be heading into more physical spaces like churches and cathedrals and getting back to some of that. But that's a bit of a personal diatribe, I guess.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
It's almost like to call it the regime is more calling it what it is too.
Yeah.
By the way, like it's the cathedral's kind of coded.
Yeah, nobody would like it if you started
speak.
calling it the synagogue. They wouldn't like that. They wouldn't.
Right.
They wouldn't. You'd be, but this is the church is one of these big ancient groups that it's okay in America to still lambast and attack. And it is a delightful term, and I understand Yarvin is using it in kind of like it reminds me of Borges a bit. So it's a literary thing. But what about the process? I wrote this play when I was living in New York City, and I had been working for this as I'm a web developer. I run a web development company. It's just a small company. I work exclusively with American talent. I made a good career doing that. I've also started to do a little bit of technical writing, but now I'm really hard into crypto, so that might be more of my focus in terms of like making money. I was living in New York City. I had been there for a number of years, and I had worked for a few years at one of these horrific consulting companies that does this flim flam grifter diversity and equity garbage. And I saw it from the inside. I saw the sociopath who runs this company, who's one of the most cynical people I've ever met. They're getting themselves mansions and flying first class or even private jets to go around and lecture Americans on equity and inclusion while they flit between London and Australia. They're not even Americans, and they use this country as a kind of a cow to bleed dry, to suck dry, tax cattle on a giant plantation. And I saw that firsthand. This is where the term bio break comes from. That was a real thing. It's used in the play.
Oh my God.
These lunatics would use that phrase. Now, I'm an Amerikaner from the Midwest. I speak a little bit of German. My children are learning German. It's my heritage. We came over here in the 19th century and then the turn of the 20th century. I'm from North Dakota. Somebody who leans to the left in North Dakota is to the right almost anywhere else. Yeah. And that's something you slowly learn. One thing that the regime excels at doing is tries to render everything in this ridiculous binary. Well, this is a blue state. Well, this is a red state. What do you mean? It's all like a psyop, and it's all meme warfare, mimetic warfare, all up and down the line. So the play, I'm trying to put myself back into the place I was. I had not written a new play for a while. We had adapted If You Start a Fire, Be Prepared to Burn into a TV show. I have a wonderful writing partner who's going to be directing the reading of Moderation that's coming up. Her name's Abby Lucas. She's wonderful. She's a Kiwi. She lives in London. And we've written, I think, like 4 screenplays together. We're working on a new screenplay right now, which is going to be hilarious. But regardless, we had adapted If You Start a Fire into a TV series, then into a series of web shorts that's going to be in the New Zealand Web Fest. You can find that at moneyshotshow.com. And the pitch of this is it's like if OnlyFans was kind of funny, if people were being asked to do funny, ridiculous things on OnlyFans. So it's a little bit of a comic critique of the internet and all the rest of it. But I've been working on that, and I was like, okay, I've got to write a play. I've got to put myself in a position to write this play. And I went and I did a lot of research, and I created an anonymous account on Twitter, which will remain anonymous. It no longer exists, but I proceeded to go very, very hard down a very, very deep rabbit hole of, you talk about like our side of Twitter, the side that's 3 clicks further away, 1 or 2 clicks further away, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's not hard to find. And I had that account. I made the mistake of associating it with my phone number. That account finally, but it's research. I was legitimately doing research. Mm-hmm. And I went really into it, and I saw some things that I regret seeing. I kind of MK Ultra'd myself a little, but this was in service of the play, and legitimately. And it was only after I took a trip to England to visit Abby and to work on one of our screenplays, and just because I like London a lot. I've done theater in London. It's one of my favorite towns. Great city. One of my plays premiered at the Finborough Theater over there. I'm hoping, of course, Moderation will have a life over there. And in any case, I went over, and it was only in England when something happened. There was an incident, and there was a manifesto going around very quickly after. And I asked somebody, send a link. My account was killed in London like that. And so very interesting. And then I came back, and I sat down at my favorite bar and restaurant in Manhattan, Kismet. Shout out to the Kismet crew. And this is back when I drank. I don't drink anymore, but we just put back some vodka sodas and just started writing the play. Yeah.
Very cool.
Wow, that's quite a story. Like in terms of the real world research you did and everything. I mean, that's, Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned earlier how it almost feels like you didn't even write the play, like it just kind of came out of you. And I mean, there's a purity to that, I think, in that sort of creative process where you really enmesh yourself in something and then just channel it. And it seems to be that was the case with Moderation.
I had more than a few people. It's not the first time that this has happened in my writing life, but this was the most intense. I had more than a few people sort of come and ask me if I was okay. I had it prompted a breakup in a funny way. That play was
really
part of a breakup that also involved Bill Burr. Believe it or not, we went to a comedy show. It was supposed to be an all ladies night comedy show, and Bill popped in and did some time, and my ex did not see Bill's set the same way I saw it. So it was supposed to thank you, Bill. She's a lovely girl, but it wasn't meant to be. And now I'm very happily engaged, and we have a kid. So it all works out the way it should. It all works out the way it should. But yeah, that was tough for my ex as well. Just the play was tough. It's tough. It's a tough play on people. And even some of the actors have been like, "Are you okay? Do you believe everything?" Like, "Oh, whoa." Because the problem with these plays is once you write a play like this and you hand it over to somebody, people are who aren't writers. They have a tendency to sort of go, "Well, you're clearly writing yourself in this play, right, Kevin?" It's like, no, I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. I'm not the he character in that play. It's not some sort of simulation of myself at all.
Right.
Crucially, you get into the voice. As we know, we wrote novels, both Matt and myself, and I write plays, and you get into the voice of a character, and it's not you. You're, as you say, channeling. You're channeling a character, and it's something that people outside of writing just don't really fully understand. That you could be so intimately familiar with the character, but yet be like, well, I don't really agree with the character's stance on this, and this. They'd be like, well, that's you. And it's like, well, no, it's not actually. It's yeah. And
I mean, in order to write compelling characters, and even compelling villains in some cases, you have to understand where they're coming from. You have to give it almost like the best blush interpretation of whatever potentially unhinged or dangerous view they might have, to be pretentious about it, akin to what John Milton does in Paradise Lost with the Satan character as a classic example, in making him genuinely interesting, and some would argue more interesting than the good characters in that work. So you have to get under the skin, but that doesn't. So in order to make good art, you have to get under the skin, but it doesn't mean you agree with it.
Absolutely, and there are opportunities to do some very hardcore, very intense research. If you're writing a play about a mountain climber, you should maybe go talk to some mountain climbers, maybe go climb a hill. I mean, it seems to me to be the most obvious thing. It's like playwrights who've never acted, or who would say, "Oh, I could never act." It's like, well, wait, that's like somebody who wants to write an opera but doesn't play the piano or doesn't play an instrument. What are you need to be in and around the theater. And even if you have extraordinary stage fright, you've got to be in the theater one way or another to write for the theater. Yeah.
I think so.
That's my best advice for young playwrights, is go and act.
Interesting. I mean, we don't have to put this in the final version if it's not a comfortable question, but I am curious, and not to be like those people who say, "Oh, the he character must be you," but I am a little bit curious. So you did research on a more extreme side of Twitter, but your current Twitter presence and the kind of the current, some of us that you associate, whatever you want to call what we dub our corner of Twitter. Did you come to that after delving into some of the more extreme areas, and then kind of settled on our more moderate wing of things?
Sure.
Or were you,
I would say that happened that way, but it was also, I think, a consequence of some of the people who took interest in my account and took interest in my writing. The fellow who helped me produce the podcast version of Moderation, which you can find at moderationplay.com, is itself taken from a reading that a theater company in DC did. The theater company is called Spooky Action. That was a very fine reading. It was the first Zoom reading. Spooky Action comes from a quantum physics term. They did the Zoom reading. Well, then this fellow found me on Twitter, and he's somewhat well known. Jeff Giese. I don't know if you know Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jeff's a fabulous guy. Very, very smart. One of the smartest people I know. And I'm actually looking forward to meeting him in person. We're gonna hang out a little later this year or early next year. But he reached out and he said, "Hey, I'm interested in art. I want to do something creative. I'm here to help produce." And so we both agreed. We both come from a bit of a tech background, so we agreed, let's find the MVP and get something out there right away. And so what we agreed to do was take the moderation reading from Spooky Action and adapt it into a podcast that we could release. So we hired a production company. They took the audio, they added some effects. And so you can find that's on all the platforms here and there.
Oh, awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Jeff did a good job of he introduced me to some of the heavies on that side of things. And he may or may not have told Jack at Twitter to check out the play, stuff like that. I'm waiting for my teal bucks to come. They're somewhere here. They must be. I don't know where they are.
They're in the mail.
Yeah, my teal bucks are in the mail. If only, right? But yeah, and then that sort of naturally developed. But my account has been remarked upon as being very heterodox, and I'm proud of that. I don't want to be. There is a place for people who are face cucks on Twitter. I'm one of them, and it's because I'm a writer, and I also I kind of don't care. Like I know what you mean. Yeah. And I also tried the Anon thing for the research. I don't. It wouldn't be for me. The Anon thing was a LARP. I have this account. It is what it is. I'm into lots of different things. I post a lot of meat. I post a lot of barbecue stuff. I just
like your T-bone.
Yeah, I made a T-bone today. Yeah, I got a whole side of beef from a butcher. But of course, what's awful about this is that's very political. If you're meat posting, you're saying a certain thing now. And I just I just really like this meat. Meat, crypto, writing, the podcasting, kind of weird Twitter, like the Blower guys side of Twitter. I just love the weird fringe, cool, strange, magical side of Twitter. All of that. The accounts that there are certain. I have a nephew who's autistic, so I don't. But there are certain. I was gonna say there are these autistic face cuck accounts where it's oh, here he is again. Oh yeah, okay, wow, yeah. Woke stuff is really terrible. Okay, yeah, gotcha.
I know what you mean.
I gotcha. So you're reducing your whole identity to this, but then those are people who are trying to sell a book, or they're trying to sell their next speaking tour, or you know what I mean. So I don't want to be that account. I want to be myself. And I want to at least kind of demonstrate for other people, you can have multiple interests and be a real person on this stupid bird website.
Right. No, a couple things about what you said. I mean, it's for one thing, yours is a great account. I enjoy it a lot. It is interesting how much stuff is getting kind of coded as being sort of right wing these days, from meat to crypto, to we were even talking about before you hopped on, even your podcast, Art of Darkness. It's not a right-wing podcast, but even just to focus on the dark side and suggest that actually might have a positive relationship to creativity in a world where creatives and artists and public figures are told they need to be so politically correct and antiseptic in everything they do. Even that, it gets coded in you talk about weird Twitter too, this celebration of not traditional is the wrong word because it was even more like this 30 years ago, but just a more healthy conception of creativity that there's a dark side to it, etc. And that also taps another thing I wanted to touch on what you said, the issue of audience and finding your audience. That taps in, I think, into Dan and I's sort of mission for this podcast. It's not necessarily that either of us are barking right wingers. But I think that both of us have written novels and are, trying to. I published mine. Dan is trying to publish his, etc. And we're trying to find an audience in the world as it is, and certainly that audience isn't in the mainstream of publishing, but rather there's this hotbed of creativity online, which is, for lack of a better term, frog Twitter or dissident right Twitter, or even more broad than that.
It's just anybody who doesn't want to be the NPR tote bag crowd.
Yeah. Anyone who's not in the regime or of the regime, you're on our side. If you're not in that place, well, by default, you're in our place. And that ties into something that I wanted to hone in on, which is the way you wrote Moderation. And it's similar to the way I wrote my novel in that it could be taken by people who are in the regime to be like, oh, this is critical of those who would be critical of the regime, and they can see what they want into it. Whereas the other people who are, maybe have a point of view that is more similar to your intended point of view will see it and see that this is a portrayal of, in your case, in moderation, him, he, a sympathetic portrayal of a guy who's cracking under the pressure of all of these societal forces. And I think, and you could tell me to what extent I'm on target or off target, but part of writing between the lines for a mainstream audience is writing in such a way that both sides can see it and see what they want to see in it.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. But that's what the regime doesn't do. That's what they don't do. That's why all their stuff is starting to suck so badly, and why nobody really wants it. It's either yes, queen, or not at all. And it's like, well, there's something between yes, queen and reality and art.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I resent the most about the American theater, is that the assumption is you're walking in as a lifelong Dem voter, and anything else would be psychotic. Or crazy. I mean, I've been in these rooms with theater people where it's a lot of like, well, we know, and we all know. You just assume because we've come into the theater a certain set of things. I did an episode of Art of Darkness recently on the great Sarah Kane, the great English playwright Sarah Kane.
I saw that.
And who was a strong influence on me, not least because I spent a year over in the UK, and I was in the Royal Court Theatre's Young Writers Program, and my first wife actually studied at the hospital where Sarah Kane hanged herself not many years before. So her ghost was sort of lingering around that scene then. She influenced a lot of my writing, and it was only upon revisiting it that I even sort of realized I had bathed myself in her presence, and it had reached out and sort of affected my writing. But in her own words, this is in the 90s, there's probably nobody more Gen X than Sarah Kane was. She, in her own writing, said, or I think it was in an interview, said, I don't want to be thought of as a woman writer because there's no such thing. I am what I am. I don't want to be a constellation of, this publishing, and the regime has a Pokemon mentality to the arts. You got to catch them all. So we got to grab this guy because he has a funny last name that is gonna da-da-da, and boom, 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 and they're playing. But there's somebody, and I've met them. These gatekeepers and these tastemakers behind the scenes are exactly the people you would think they are.
Who are not interested in story, they're interested in presenting a story that reaffirms or reifies their ideology, which is not going to be an entertaining story typically.
Well, they're playing a meta game. You want to talk about Facebook meta, right? They're not necessarily picking your play or your book for its own sake. They're picking it for how it sits on the shelf with everything else. So they're curating the entirety of culture. Well, is this play going to sit well but next to this play? And what does the playwright look like? And what do you know? They're curating a little. It's a little. They're putting little tchotchkes in their collection, these arts administrators. I'm probably not doing myself any favors, but there's a quality of that, and you meet them, and many of them are megalomaniacs, and they're house cats. They're all about their institution and their control and their place. And I think at a certain point, the art gets lost in that. The United States, arts administrators get paid in the United States. Artists don't get paid in the United States.
Yeah. No, you're definitely talking to two people who are familiar with that as well. We'll leave it at that, not to get into work.
And I'm going to politely ask for you to delete the last 3 minutes of this podcast. I'm joking. And I've worked, please leave it in. But I've worked with wonderful people at these institutions too, and I've had some incredible opportunities as a consequence of the writing. But we all know that there's this subtext happening, and there's the frogs, right? They're boiling and boiling and boiling and boiling, and you can feel the culture moving and feel the gatekeepers clamping down and making, adding more control and excluding certain people because of some sort of bizarre agenda, which you're not privy to, or you're not even allowed to utter, but it's there and as clear as day to everybody. But as soon as you notice it, you're some sort of schizo, reactionary lunatic who needs to shut up and go away. Yeah.
And when it comes to demographics, like as a playwright who is a straight white guy, you're in a minority today, and you there's a lot you can't write about, which is very, very difficult.
I've had producers or different people in the theater come and tell me you should send your plays out without your first name. Just send it out as K. You might have better luck. Things like that. Absolutely
I've had the same
bizarre.
said to me about my writing, that I should, because I wrote a play about that touched on issues of sexual violence, and they said I should pretend I'm a woman.
This is so insane. It's so crazy. It's like, read the play. Why do you need me to sell the play?
And it even had a progressive.
The death of the author.
It essentially had a moral that dovetailed with their own thinking. But
it doesn't make any.
Even that wasn't enough.
It's so strange. Yeah. I think I can put myself in their mentality, but ultimately, finally, I cannot, because I'm not a bigot.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's one of these things. Like, there's a lot of instances in which I totally understand the other side. I can understand the logic of communism, for example, even though I'm anti-communist. But some of the shit that we're kind of talking about here with the modern arts, not modern art like modern art, but contemporary art bureaucracy, I don't know. I mean, I think on some level, because you can't, like, it would be easy if it was reducible to, oh, this is just what the market demands, which is often how it's presented. But I think that's a lie. It's often presented like, oh, the people demand, diverse art that like doesn't piss this audience off, and like it's what we need to do. But I don't think it reduces to money. I think that it's a much more. I know it's tired to compare wokeness to religion, but I'm still going to do it here. I think it is a much more like a spiritual or pseudo-spiritual sense about what culture is supposed to be, and the infiltration of politics and ideology, the politics and ideology of the regime into the arts and into culture. And yeah, I mean, not to get conspiratorial about it, but I think that a lot of these sort of artistic bureaucracies that exist, they're right downstream from like the Democratic establishment.
Absolutely.
Or maybe even the Republican, just the establishment, the regime. And the letter.
The agencies. Yeah. You absolutely, if you're interested in this line of inquiry, the Art of Darkness episode that we did last night with Blauer on Disney is required listening, because this is sort of one of the topics that comes up. And one thing that obsesses me and that I think a lot about is wondering, for how long has the money not really mattered? Because the way the regime presents everything is that these decisions are driven financially, principally. But I think at some point we crossed a transom, and the money, we know they just print the money. It's a fugazi. It doesn't. It's all flim flam and make believe. And I think that if you look back at the history of Disney, you can see very specifically in World War II when Disney became a wing of the government. It quite literally did in World War II. It produced the most media for the United States government at that point. And if you read these books on, if you read the books on the mouse in World War II, they'll make it, the public-facing story is sort of like, well, gosh, it was so hard, and they tried so hard to get Disneyland made, and they had to mortgage everything, and I strongly suspect that these stories are covers for deals that are going on in the background. Disney was probably brought into a smoky room at one point and said, look, we're going to give you a sizable chunk of Florida. You'll get whatever you want here. I'm not, quite.
No.
Yeah,
that sounds.
Blauer talked about how the takeover of Orlando and that region was executed in a similar way to the way that they prevented a communist regime from taking over in Guatemala. They used the same playbook for Disney World as they did in Guatemala. So this is not so. You're telling me that at the same time that the Disney company was the propaganda wing for the United States government, they were having financial problems. I don't buy it. I don't believe it.
Okay, well, I'm going to listen to that. That sounds absolutely fascinating. I know a bit about Disney. Well, we don't need to turn this conversation. It sounds like you already had the conversation, so we will listen to it and recommend that our listeners.
I do a mean Mickey Mouse too. You can hear me on the podcast.
Oh, okay.
I started out a little shy, but by the end, I was doing Mickey. I'm not gonna do it for them. I'm not gonna do it.
No, yeah, you got that. You got to.
I gotta warm up. I gotta warm up to get into Mickey.
And you got to keep certain perks for your own podcast.
I'm allowed to do Mickey because I'm a quarter Irish.
Right.
You're not allowed to do Mickey if you're not Irish.
Exactly. But not to comment directly on the Disney stuff, but to go back to the issue of money and is it about money? The other thing that it's important to at least touch on in a cursory manner is the manufacturing of taste, because I think that it's not about with the decisions of like what gets greenlit, what gets made, what gets presented, what gets boosted. It's not all about money. But I'm also not so optimistic necessarily that like, if only we made base stuff, it would get an audience. I do think there's a considerable degree to which these institutions and the media of it all and the immersiveness of the internet and the way that they have us by the balls and the Facebook of it all, the metaverse of it all, the way that this stuff surrounds us and that we can't escape the regime. They do, I think, manufacture people's tastes to a considerable degree too. So sometimes it's like, people want this diverse Marvel content, for example, and I do think people go out to see that, but I also think that there's a considerable degree to which these companies are at this point able to totally manufacture taste as well. So that's a little bit blackpilling, I suppose.
No, but aren't they already weaving in entire Mandarin subplots into some of these Marvel films that only screen over in China?
This is my understanding.
Yeah. So I mean, we're into something else entirely here. I mean, this is a carnival-esque kind of thing. I do have the pleasure of tweeting occasionally with Walter Kern, and he'd be an amazing guest for your show.
Oh,
if you could get Walter on, that would be amazing.
We should try.
Yeah, I mean, he just did Tucker, so I mean, he's quite a get. But he's
such a
brilliant writer, very sensitive, and I'm very simpatico with him on Twitter, which I'm strange to find myself living this way, very bizarre. But he's a wonderful man on there, and I just really appreciate his account. He's very real, and I think he lives in Montana, so I'm sure there's some of that. But I tweeted at him at one point about how Twitter is a hall of mirrors. It's a hall of funhouse mirrors that presents itself as a public square. All these companies present as the public forum. They are nothing. They are not at all a public forum. Your account is singular to you. I think they have their hands way more involved in what's throttled, what's not, what gets boosted, what doesn't, than anybody would be comfortable accepting. And if you
just look at what's trending on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean, it's always. Sometimes you still see something slip through the cracks where it's like, this actually might be trending. But a lot of it is like, people are talking about how bad Trump was. People are talking about how wonderful.
Yeah, it's like hashtag P tapes. It's like, it's 2021 and crime is out. I'm talking about, what are you doing? Yeah, for sure. I have a concept for a political podcast that I may do at some point if my crypto gains are enough for me to never worry about getting destroyed. Please wish me luck to the moon, or as we say in Floki, to the moob. That's a whole thing. Shout out to Hydrode in the Floki chat. I'll let him know. I'll let Floki chat know about this episode. If you suddenly see a bunch of accounts with like horns and Vikings and shilling Floki, that you'll know it was this.
Great.
But they're a great community. It's really actually fun.
Yeah.
What was I talking about? Oh goodness. The political podcast. I like the idea of doing a show called the dystopia box, something like that, and it would be the Twitter trending and the LinkedIn trending, these hell boxes that sort of tell their own sort of horror stories. Every day you wake up, what new fresh hell does Silicon Valley have for us today? And you go on LinkedIn and it's like, workers are quitting at a rapid pace. Amazon is wants your blood. It's just this horrific tabloid level garbage that's thrown into our. The other thing Twitter is an interactive tabloid. But I thought a political podcast that would be quite fun would be to do like a daily 5 days a week. You just open up those two things and just run them down with sympathetic.
Oh, it's a great idea.
It'd be fascinating, wouldn't it?
It'd also be really easy because there's no shortage of stuff to talk about. Sorry, Dan.
You already do those tweets occasionally, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It's very funny and very, compelling because it's right there. It's, did you know that Joe Biden is the best guy in the world? And did you know that Kamala Harris is the smartest woman in the world?
Unbelievable.
And all of that stuff.
Oh. I mean, and poor Joe Biden, my theory about his administration, I'm calling it the Wicker Man administration. I don't know if that's really taken off, but I'm going to keep saying it. I think we're watching a human sacrifice in real time. I think the contemporary Democratic Party is a bunch of goofy, dressed up, freaky pagans, not the centrists, but the radical wing, which has sort of taken over the cultural arm of the party. And they're just marching. They love the theater of this senile, potentially demented old white man on public display, literally falling apart every single day in the most public way possible. That's what they want. It's a feature, not a bug. He stands in for the old, tired white America that means well, and he's a Catholic, and he was Obama's second. It's horrific to watch. Apparently, they're saying he pooped himself at the Vatican. God. They're saying he had a bathroom accident at the Vatican. That's one thing that you can always use as a how to say this. The most elite wing of the regime's mind control kitchen cabinet, the people who really pull the strings when it starts to trigger basic Freudian stuff. That's their playbook.
Yeah.
And if you don't know the documentary, he's not a man of the right. He's a man of the left. But if you don't know the documentary, The Century of the Self, Adam Curtis. Yeah, you have to watch that. Yeah, their playbook is all Freud, and they still use it. It's Trump and the P-tape. It's what were we all freaking out about with COVID? Toilet paper. They use all these poo-poo, pee-pee, basic, root chakra crap to grab your attention, and that's how they mess with you, and that's how you know they're evil little scriptwriters are behind it. That's one of my crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theories.
That's rather striking, but no, I see where you're coming from for sure. I mean, I'd never even considered kind of that angle on the Biden thing. It's a distinctly darker angle, I would say.
Well, when you accept that politics is show business for ugly people, things get a lot easier. I'm nominally a Catholic. I'm a cradle Catholic, and I felt nothing but scorn and revulsion when Biden, when they installed Biden, and that's part of their program. They need to make something that as complex and as great and as historically rich as the Catholic Church, and put a corpse in to go to the Vatican from America. That's very much what they want out of this. And he is really only the second Catholic president in the United States history, and of course we know what happened to the first one. So we're watching an empty suit parade around nominally as a Catholic. It's all theater. It's all mind control. Okay. All right. I'm talking myself into a hole here. Yeah. This is where the moderation stuff comes from too. I do hold many of these opinions. I just have I do like to think I have a bit of sophistication about it. So, nobody has to worry about me.
Yeah. No. I mean, crucially, Biden, there is that sick element. But also there is, he is a vessel through which they sell the regime ideas, which are, truly hateful and, ideas that, many people would find, like if Kamala Harris said them, they'd be like, what the fuck? No, we're not. But when old Joe Biden says your kid can have hormones because it's that's something that goes over somehow. It goes over okay. I mean, not okay for many people. But,
I don't know. I don't know that it does, and that's obviously a loaded issue. I would just say what if Joe Biden is a burner presidency? What if he's a burner?
Yeah. No,
like a burner phone.
No, I get what you're saying. Whether by purposeful conspiratorial installation of a burner-style president or not, I would say functionally that is what he is. I mean, people. I'm not that old, but people who were alive, like in the '70s,
Carter.
Carter, but also on the Republican side, Gerald Ford. Who knows anything about Gerald Ford? I mean, he's the guy who took over after Nixon was impeached or resigned. So he's one of these style presidents that I don't think is going to be remembered fondly or negative. Well, he'll be remembered because of the strike, the rather notable times during which he came to power. But as a president, he's, as you say, kind of this burner placeholder president.
I think the narrative that's going on is for the left is Obama was in office for 8 years. He inherited a mess from the bad guys. The good guys didn't get in. We suffered under Orange Man. And now we're finishing the job before. I think that's their narrative. Who knows? Oh gosh, we're going to get into the Orange Man. But he drove them completely insane. I don't think Trump 2 would be a good thing, for the record. But the Schadenfreude would be incredible. But that's not why you should elect a president. That's not why you should vote for a man. But nevertheless, there is a certain amount of like pure animosity between the two sides, where it's like you just want to see the other side suffer, and that's terrible.
Certainly, they have it with us.
Oh yeah, they feel the same way. I mean, they hate you and want you dead. They want your kids enslaved, and they want you poor and broke and owning nothing. And they're selling you some sort of weird dream of like a Scandinavian and Northern European style socialism, but none of the programs ever work out. The middle class just continues to get gutted. One of the things that I say is American liberalism is vaporware. It never arrives. It's just we don't have healthcare. We don't have. It's just worse. Everybody agrees Obamacare is terrible. Your kids are going to have things worse than you, but we gotta try to vote for Bernie. Like what? Like, anyway.
Well, to bring it back to moderation, I mean, I think this isn't too much of a tangent leap here. I think ties very much into politically what you're saying. One thing I was thinking about is, so as you said, moderation is a play that could be open for interpretation, as all great art is. We could say it's right of center on certain issues, but you could also have a sort of more anti-corporate, left-wing, or in an economic, classically left sense reading of the play. And not to sound like a fucking Jacques Derrida guy talking about readings of the play, but you get what I'm saying. Sure. There's different interpretations of the play.
Yeah.
One thing I talked to Dan about this after we'd seen the play and we were preparing the notes for this. And also, one of the interesting things on Twitter, and this corner of Twitter we're talking about, is that it's not just right-wing Twitter. It's also associated with, the Red Scare crowd, Amy Therese. Post-left is another one of these dumb terms that who knows what it even means. But I'll just say post-left, dirtbag left. It's the combination of those two things, certain left-wing considerations economically and certain right-wing considerations socially, so to speak. And I don't remember if the word dignity and the concept of human dignity is brought up explicitly into play in moderation, but I think that the concept of human dignity is rather operative when we're talking about what is the connection between some of these economically left-wing people and some of these socially conservative right-wing people. What brings them together, I think, is a concern with people, just normal people's ability to lead a dignified life. And there are certain economic, corporate, capitalistic threats to that, and there's also a hell of a lot of sort of socially progressive threats to that. And I think that moderation, rather than being ideological, it takes a look at two characters who are in a line of work that compromises their human dignity to an extreme degree. Talking about bio breaks and having their eye movements tracked. And I guess just politically, you talk about the vaporware of American liberalism and how it never it's this. That's what's so insidious about it. It promises it presents itself as the party that is going to defend that basic dignity.
We're always going to be
increasingly.
We're always going to be Sweden in 4 or 5 years. If we just vote for the right guy, we're going to be Sweden in 8 years. Yeah, but without Swedes, we're going to be an extremely diverse Sweden. Suddenly.
Yeah. No, so it promises that, but never delivers upon that, and instead is beholden to all these kind of shadowy interests. And then, the Republican Party is not great either, but at least it's not quite as shadowy in.
Right, the Republicans are the guys who tell you they want to bend you over. They just tell you.
Yeah.
Jesse Kelly's getting a lot of heat right now for his tweet about how he's going to kick his son out when he's 18. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This is the normie right sort of conception of America and of the reality of it. And in a way, he's brave to come out and say it because he knows he's going to get all sorts of heat. But it's a bit of kayfabe too. I mean, he's just sort of, is that how you say that word? That's a word that's going around. I quite like it. I mean, it's going into my lexicon. But that's our conservative. When you're going to pull yourself in, it's just like, are you living in the same reality as I'm living in? Like, what are you talking about? I guess if you're part of the National Review panel and you're on a trust fund and you grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and you conceptually think the GDP going up is going to save us out here in flyover, I can understand this, but I mean, boy, that's not how the world works at all. So not helpful. The right doesn't have a very good narrative right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And it needs a new narrative, and I think, not to be too grandiose or glib about it, but it plays like moderation. It approaches that idea of, just what it's like to be a human and just a normal, average human working a job at this particular point in time in history, and you diagnose the problems, and again, there's certain left-wing, more economic considerations. There's a lot of more socially conservative considerations about how these characters are just totally atomized, totally atomized individuals. So I tie the play in because I don't think the play has a specific political ideology, but it shows rather than tells some of these issues that it would be good to see, politicians, and some of them, people like Tucker Carlson, I give props to for addressing them.
Have me on your show, Tucker. I'll come on.
I
know that
feel
Tucker's.
Like you could be there.
Oh God. Oh my God. Oh my. I have to do OPSEC. I'd have to get a security system or something. I'd have to bring my pillow onto that show and cuddle it. It would be nerve wracking.
You'd be a good Tucker.
He's very interesting. Tucker's very, very interesting, and it is fun to be on Twitter and to very clearly know that his people are on that. Paying attention to the
get
discourse.
Their storylines from our sphere of Twitter.
Yeah, they're in it. Yep. They're in it, and very interesting. I appreciate that. I mean, moderation is called moderation for a reason, right? That word. It's operating, I think, at least on like 5 or 6 levels in terms of what the play is. And I don't want to live on the Jeff Bezos favela and then come home to the metaverse. I don't want to plug my children into the metaverse at the end of the day. There's a scene in one of the early Disney shorts where it's Mickey's, whether Mickey's or Donald's, I think it's Mickey's trailer, right? Because people forget this. Mickey was a bit of a shifty character at the beginning. Steamboat Willie, he's kind of abusive and he's a trickster and he's a little bit of a Chaplin-esque kind of an outsider character. Yeah, he's a trickster. Yeah. They only later made him a family man. And Mickey's arc can be seen to mirror the arc of Irish Americans in American popular culture and history. Mickey's an Irish name. He was an outsider when they created him. Initially, he was going to be called Mortimer, but Walt's wife just recoiled at that and pitched Mickey, and so it became Mickey. But in this Disney short, Mickey's in his camper van, his trailer camper van, and the world is sunshiny and beautiful, and he's with he's Donald's there, and all the animals are there, and he's in this pastoral setting, and then he presses a button, and the camper van closes down. and you discover that he's camped himself in almost like a David Lynch nightmare industrial slum zone. And I think that's the reality they want to create for us, where we zap ourselves into the Zuckerverse, right? But then in meat space, unless we're part of the privileged elect, we're off to the Bezos factory, and we have to wear diapers while we're working.
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is
art
go on.
In this world. In this world of this regime mediated existence, what do you think is the difference between the type, and drilling down specifically into theater, what do you think the difference is when there were playwrights like David Mamet, like Neil LaBute, as compared to some of the plays we see today, which are more, shall go nameless, but are agitprop.
Agitprop.
And, what would you say the difference is, not just, superficially, but in terms of the story itself?
Well, they'll tell you themselves. If you go into the graduate programs or you read their writing about theater and what theater should do, many of them they're just Marxists. They're just communists or crypto-communists. And it's in their writing, it's in what they study. And they really believe things like the hero's journey is some sort of patriarchal expression of systems of oppression. And so we have to move away from these stories about single heroic figures doing heroic things. That's their thinking. We need to show more social innovation. And yet they always sort of come back to the great man's story. They can't help themselves. But in the case of, and let's just take all the racial questions out of this, but in the case of something like Hamilton, you're still watching a play about one of the founding fathers. You're still going back to the re-edification of this regime's founding mythologies. The difference between those things and, not picking on Hamilton specifically, but the difference between those things and, Mamet or LaBute or whatnot it's the quality of the air that's left in the play for interpretation. You could even throw Sarah Kane into this, an atheist, lesbian, English female playwright. These plays have enough room to allow multiple interpretations, and they're not purely polemical. They tend to be in conversation with the very nature of what theater is, which then in turn is in conversation with the very nature of what our humanity is. You cannot. I went on Forest of Symbols recently, which is another fine podcast. If you're not familiar with him, you should check him out. And we talked a lot. Yeah, talked a lot about theater, and he led with this idea that he was sort of initially sold that film and television replaced theater. We don't need theater anymore. And I came back with my argument that, if you want to understand Western civilization and the roots of film and television and how we conceive of the self and of the individual, it's inextricably bound with theater. So I would just say that the great plays interrogate our humanity, and your humanity is so much more than whether you voted for Joe Biden or Donald Trump.
Yeah. I actually had a thought on with regard to theater versus TV and movies, and with regard to moderation. One thing, I hadn't seen a play or read a play in a long time before watching moderation this past week, and one thing and this might hinge on a broader topic that I think Dan and I wanted to bring up. The one really striking element in moderation is how a lot of the plays between, dialogue between a man and a woman, but when they are not having dialogue, what you see is them giving a first-person present narration on what they're seeing on their screens as they're moderating, Facebook, or not, it's not Facebook in the play, but, social media, and seeing these horrific things like beheadings, and you get the thing, they say things like, I am watching a beheading in a desert, and it's a very close first person present on what they're seeing and how it's affecting them. They just kind of say it in a way that's really interesting. And for me, that was a reminder of what theater can do that movies, it's not that movies and TV can't do it, but you just don't see it as much, which is it's a more interior medium, so to speak, in general. There is kind of meta TV where people break the fourth wall and stuff, but more so in theater, you really get these soliloquies that really show the interiority of a character. So, just another thing I noted as a power that theater can have is kind of the language.
If we feel like we are in this skirmish or this war with techno-capital, and techno-capital is prohibiting us from expressing ourselves, theater is an extraordinary place to do it, to still do it, because it does not take a heck of a lot of money to write a radio play and to produce a radio play. It doesn't take a lot of money to do a reading of a play and to put it on Zoom. It doesn't take a lot of money to rent the space down in St. Paul here and put on a little play when compared to a proper film production, much less like a television type production. So theater has a way, this sort of punk poor theater that I admire, this black box theater has a way of punching above its weight. And the tradition and the techniques, that's really when I cracked the play open. That first person, I realized, oh, that's going to work. I'm always trying to write my plays in such a way that, two or three people, somebody running the soundboard and a couple of actors on stage could run a very, very bare bones production of moderation. You wouldn't even need a set in theory. You could do it. You could do this in a park. And if an audience was really engrossed, I think you could get the play across. And film and television, you can't do that.
To what extent do you think the future of theater is the future of the theater that we care about, not the theater that is, consonant with regime propaganda, the theater that is actually telling a story that is engaging, that is thought-provoking? To what extent do you think the future of that is in this kind of guerrilla theater, this dissident space where you're doing radio pods, you're doing Zooms, you're doing to what extent is this the wave of the future?
Yeah, I think it's a little strange because we obviously I did not write moderation to be done on Zoom. I don't think anybody had written their plays prior to the happening, the great flu. I don't think that anybody was writing, and yet my play, for better or worse, sort of is served in a funny way by that medium, but it's not meant to be on Zoom. I'm glad we're doing this Zoom reading in December 6th, moderationplay.com. I'm glad that it's happening. It's nice that people are taking an interest, but it's meant to be live and real and in person. And in fact, that's the meaning of the play, is that you have to sit with these characters in physical space. And I can't wait until it gets a world premiere, hopefully at one of the most fabulous theaters in the world, right? I can't wait until London starts calling, or New York. But I can't wait until opening night or press night and it's over and everybody whips their phones out, There's this sort of, that tension lives inside of that play. Now, to answer your question, I don't know, because we're all reeling from it. In a funny way, 2020 worked in my favor because I'm a very online guy, and a lot of people who hitherto would have been more normie types, like a little less online, were driven online. And so I'm waiting there like the spider for the fly. It's like, oh, well, you want to do more of my weird internet play? All right, let's go. Do you know? So I think that if you have something to say there now, the least of your problems is the media or the medium, right? You can write a radio play, you can do a podcast. Anybody with a laptop and a microphone can get started doing something. I don't think that you can ever crush this spirit of dissident, fringe, aggressive theater. When you think about Sarah Kane, she would be accused of being a leftist at the time, left-leaning, but it's neither here nor there. She was dumping these plays into the middle of Sloane Square in the most Tony part of one of the most Tony cities in the world, and throwing war zones onto the stage and forcing these people, some of the wealthiest, most well-heeled people in the world, to sort of confront the darkest side of humanity. And what a truly transgressive, truly wonderful theatrical expression. We'll always need this. I think about Václav Havel and how he became the president of the Czech Republic, having started as a playwright. And, America will never be like a theater first country. I talk about this on Forest of Symbols. We think in terms of film and television. I'm writing screenplays. I've got some some screenplays that I'm quite proud of, and hopefully one day we'll be able to produce one of these screenplays. And
awesome.
Fun that I write with Abby, my very good friend. But I just think as long as people want to get together in a room and see theater, there's an opportunity for us to sort of kind of jam the crowbar into the culture and make just enough room so we can start to breathe. And then I think you'd be surprised how these things start to have an effect, almost like a magical effect with a K. You reach one person, you change the world. And I think that what we do with theater has the potential to be as impactful as something like Squid Game. Even though everybody's talking about Squid Game, what effect really does it have? And
absolutely. Yeah. Do you think that there is a path from this kind of dissident space back onto Broadway at some point I'm not going to say the short term, obviously that's not the case, but, maybe there's a few stops here and there. There's, an independent theater company in, in Minnesota. And from there, you do see rumblings, not necessarily in the theater industry, but you do see rumblings online. I know that the writer with the Twitter handle Lomez is trying to do a fiction and I think poetry contest, and for the type of fiction that can't really be published today. And I think that theater should be part of the conversation. That we should
absolutely. I think you're talking about passageprize.com.
Yes, exactly. I heard you got it better than I do.
Yeah, and which I just heard about on the Bird website. You're absolutely right. And if we cede, and this is part of the problem that the right in America has, is that they've ceded the cultural territory almost entirely for 50 years, and it's absolutely a crime. Theater, and it just stinks of all this, and it's and then you go over to England and it's this rich part of the culture, and they think about it in a completely different way, and you begin to see how important it is and how it moves culture and drives narratives. One of the other things on that exchange with Jesse Kelly that happened, I saw some anon account replied to him, suggesting that there is room for anon accounts. We need this. We need to be able to speak freely. And in this climate, many people don't feel able to. Well, then some account wrote back to him in a snarky way and said, you write science fiction. You're writing a science fiction novel. That isn't exactly something that builds civilization. And I wrote back and I said, novels do build civilizations. Plays do build civilizations.
Absolutely.
You can't think about the modern idea of Spain or the Spanish without Don Quixote. You think about the sort of modern German speaking sphere without Faust.
Absolutely.
These are not the cart. These are the horse. So that's such a narrow-minded way of looking at things, and I'm afraid that right-leaning people really suffer from this. This idea that, in America, to be an appreciator of the arts is somehow a left-wing thing. That has to go. That idea has to go to the birds. It's got to go away.
And not to the Twitter birds, but to the vultures who will
we
devour
the idea. I mean, look, if you have all these boomer cons and all these normie cons who can't figure out why have we lost the culture? Why did it happen so quickly? Well, it's like you just focused on going to your church. You made an unholy alliance with the neoconservatives. You lost two really unpopular wars, and you completely ceded the entire cultural sphere to crypto Marxists. And now you can't figure. And you laughed at artists and called them whatever. You sort of mocked them and left that whole arena to these other lunatics on the other side of the aisle. And now there's nothing in the middle left. So in a funny way, the project right now is to reclaim the middle. And as far as Broadway goes, the way that's going to happen is, one, straight plays like it's very, very hard to get straight plays to Broadway for any meaningful length of time.
True.
Mamet writes about this in, I think it was The Theater of this book. And he was talking about how the theater that he knew that everybody grew up with, which was dominantly a middle-class Jewish theater in New York City, there was Jewish people and it was cultural and middle class, and that's gone, right? It's been Disneyfied and commercialized and all the rest of it. But he also made the point that that argument is like being the grumpy old guy complaining about the olden days, right? And
Yeah.
he very wisely in that book makes the point that there's going to be something that the kids are doing that to them will be their own golden age, and it may be happening on. There's a lot of fun theatrical weird stuff going on in crypto around like memes and meme stories, meme tribalism and meme war, man, and all of that. That stuff has a lot of theatricality in it, and. But I do think that there will always be this irrepressible hunger for the pure theatrical form of people who go into a space and see live performance, especially now after the before times, or after what happened right after COVID. There's going to be a hunger for that, and as people,
absolutely,
yeah, I think we can reclaim that space. But it's going to happen through celebrities attaching themselves to what are perceived to be serious plays. If you can get a celebrity, this is awful, but if Alec Baldwin decides he doesn't want to work on movies for a minute, and it's too soon to say that, but that's what pops into my head. If Alec Baldwin says, I want to do some theater, and he attaches himself to a play, that's enough to drive the play
100%.
forward. Because we have a celebrity culture. That's the reality of it. But plays do have the advantage of being considered serious in America.
Often
it's so
unearned,
serious. Yeah. Did you say inert?
No, well, yes, inert as well, but I said often unearned.
Right.
And when it comes to the right or the center or whoever is not regime approved taking back this space, I have a feeling it will not be Ben Shapiro's musical. So he supposedly wants to write a musical.
Does he? What does he want to write?
I don't know exactly. I heard it, mentioned somewhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that more generally, I find if you approach normies or what have you about dissident art, what they will come back with is, oh yeah, like Ben Shapiro's production company or something of that nature, and it's It's like that's not what we're talking about.
Right. It isn't necessarily. I like the idea of like Internet Grifter the musical. That would be really funny. That would be great.
Yeah.
BoomerCon the musical. Hey, and look, if that production company is looking for scripts and wants to do something clever and interesting, shout out. I'm not, reach out.
True.
Slide into my DMs. My DMs are open. Yeah, I don't know. I think this stuff has to emerge naturally, and the culture that we've created and that we're a part of online, this new vernacular, all the new slang, all the fun terms, the way crypto dovetails into everything, the way that Frog Twitter dovetails into everything, and they have these like interlocking pieces, is delightful. And our challenge, I think, in many ways, it's very similar to Walt Disney's challenge. I've got Disney on the brain, you can tell. But our challenge is to bring that vision that we have of the world in digital into the material world. And I think that theater is very explicitly that. Yeah. So if we're in this bird website ghetto talking to each other, that's important. And that Sam has got, that's important. We have to do that. We have to pump each other up. We have to support each other. We have to let each other know you're not alone. You're out there. You're experiencing this same bizarre thing that I am, and you're not atomized. You're a part of something. This is one of the things that meme coins do a very good job at. If you buy a meme coin right now and you get into the Telegram chat, you can immediately become part of this community and this tribe and feel like you have a stake in it. And people are hungry for that experience. The musical I want to write, and I talked about this on Forest of Symbols, I want to write Killdozer, the musical.
That would be awesome.
I want to make a musical about Marvin Heemeyer. I want to do a musical number where he's in his hot tub in Colorado, in Granby, Colorado, and I want God to do a duet with him about how he can make the Killdozer. That has built-in merch. It has a built-in audience. And look, Book of Mormon.
True.
Very, very good. Very intense. Very much not cathedral media, not regime media. So there's room for it. And if anybody wants to help me put together and produce Killdozer the musical, reach out because I have some ideas.
We may be in touch with you on that, Kevin.
Yeah, do it.
And Book of Mormon, crucially, that it would be another example of where you have a popular musical that is critical of or pokes fun at the right from a writers who are sympathetic. And I think you kind of need to, and that's kind of what I did in my novel. It is a satire of a figure on the right, and made up figure, not a real person. But in order to actually access something that's a sympathetic portrayal, like you have to have sympathy for the person. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you do have some sympathy for Mr. Killdozer, and you would do him justice in this play.
Look, Marv Heemeyer is a fellow who looks like he could have been a distant cousin of mine from South Dakota. And I feel like I know this guy. I feel like I grew up around the milieu, such as it is, that this guy comes from. And much like Marv, I too moved from one of the Dakotas to a more purpley state. I didn't move to Colorado, I moved to Minnesota. Yeah. And the politics are wildly different, the cultures are wildly different, but it's in the same region and you kind of sound the same. So you're and nobody's going to give you the lay of the land. Nobody's going to tell you this is how we do things out here. They're going to let you fall on your face a million times. Yeah. That was very much my experience in Minnesota. I'm sure I was awful too. You're a young man, you're flailing around, you don't know what you're doing. But Marv went to Colorado and he just never fit in, never got on the right side of the right people in that town of Granby. And he was what do they say on Killdozer Day? It was a one man pushed to his limits, pushed too far. And I like the idea that he wakes up in limbo. And he has amnesia. He doesn't remember why he made the Killdozer. And Ronald Reagan is there Ronald Reagan is his Virgil to remember why. And Ronald Reagan is feeding him hallucinogenic jelly beans. It's just an idea. I don't know, but how cool would an outlaw country industrial metal musical about the Killdozer be? I can see it in my mind's eye.
This is great. I want to see it in what's a big theater? The Broad, I think. The Broad, something. I don't know.
I got to do it. My writing schedule right now is funny because I'm finishing a screenplay with Abby. The screenplay is called Doug Must Die, and this is about a would-be life coach who moves from L.A. Her fiance gets eaten by a shark. She moves from LA. It's comedy.
Like you do.
Yeah.
Like you do. Gets eaten by a shark.
Yeah. She moves from LA to Austin, Texas to become a life coach. Her guru invites her out there to be, a full-time life coach. And her first client turns out to be an agent of death who works for the IRS, but doesn't know that he's an agent of death. So it's called Doug Must Die, and then the life coaches start dying one by one, around her. So it's a comedy. I'm working on that, and then I do want to adapt moderation into a screenplay. I've got a buddy out here who's just I love the theater. You can tell I love the theater. I want to make theater. I want to make that musical. I want to do all these different things. But this buddy of mine is like, man, you gotta take that.
Strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, and so I might adapt that into a screenplay, and then it might be something we just do ourselves. We just get $250,000 together and just do it out here like over a month, It wouldn't take that much, and if we get a good director, good actors, it's something we could put together and maybe make something cool. Yeah.
The intention would be a film for moderation?
Possibly, yeah. I think I would need to adapt it. I would need to add like a B story and flesh out some things, but I think it's something that could be done with very little overhead.
Yeah. I mean, it's a film, so it's more than theater, but nevertheless, it's a very low budget film.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
and I think I agree that it would be fantastic. In that case, I guess you'd have to possibly move away from the first person narration and actually show some computer screens on TV. But yeah,
I think it could be amazing. I think with the right director, if we really set out to make something that was filmic with a theatrical foundation, there's some really fabulous film adaptations of plays. Amadeus is one of the greatest films of all time. Sure. Glengarry Glen Ross, dynamite. But you have to really rethink it in terms of the film medium.
Right.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to do. So we'll see. Could be interesting.
Neil LaBute, famously someone who has a foot in both worlds. And I was shocked to find that In the Company of Men wasn't a play first, because, or maybe it was. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think it might have been. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, but I mean, like, all of his films have that quality of, like, clearly this could easily be done on the stage, and and has the added benefit of something like that as a low overhead. So yeah,
I have a group of friends who are all like-minded, and if you're ever in flyover here, you ever visit Minnesota, you're welcome to join us. We do every 2 weeks on a Friday. We have a buddy. This is the same guy who's urging me to do the screenplay adaptation, who has a pretty fabulous place between here and Stillwater, Minnesota, kind of out in the woods and everything. But he has his living room has a screen. He's got the projector, and so we screen all these classic movies, and we do like a round where one of us picks the movie. We just did Mean Streets. Before that, we did Withnell and I, the great English movie. A lot of Americans don't know that movie, but if you don't know that and you're a theater person, you have to watch Withnell and I. Go out of your way to find Withnell and I.
Okay.
Yeah, and then before that, it was Easy Rider, and we're going through and doing this. My friend Dan picked a very unusual movie, but which was very inspiring to me as kind of a DIY film. Have you heard of this film, Sound of My Voice? Have you heard of this?
No.
You might check it out. There's a woman named Britt Marling. Have you heard of Britt Marling? She and her group got really embedded at Sundance and for a few years, and they made this movie, I think, on just like a dirt cheap budget, like no budget, but it's all about the psychology of a cult. And it's one of those movies that, the budget was $135,000.
Wow.
Right. But I'm getting chills when I'm talking about it, because it's like, is it a great movie? Is it The Shining? No. But is it a thought-provoking, artful exploration of psychology and cult psychology? Yes. And that we can do this, guys. Do you know what I mean? Like, and this is, if I've learned anything from Art of Darkness this past year, it's that going over these lives of these great artists, many of them, they just do it. They don't take no. Like Kubrick made his first movie. He got money together from like a dentist in the Bronx, like family friend, gave him money. He took all his actors out to California, made a film called oh darn, now the name escapes me. I have to look it up. But he made this film out in California, nearly killed his actors with some chemical gas. He was trying to create a gas effect. But he did it. And then 5 years later, he was directing Spartacus.
Wow.
And so there's a willpower that these artists have. And so in a funny way, I think that's one of the things we're looking for in this show is like, how did they do it? Oh, they did. They just did it. They're not waiting for these administrators to anoint them and do it.
They had to. It was just in them. And I mean, I think that to an extent is what unites all artists, because like as Matt and I were talking, many times, producing art, it's not something that necessarily really serves any real benefit in your material life, but it serves a spiritual benefit. So it's like, well, if we spend X amount of time doing a podcast, if we spend X amount of time writing a novel, will this ever make us any money? Doubtful. But will this be something that we like doing and have fun doing? Of course. And will this be something that, we have to do because we have this vision and this voice that, like, I would never, it sounds, try hard or whatever, but I wouldn't be happy in my life if I never wrote that novel. I just had to write it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think when you feel that need to do it, I think that's how you know it's something good.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. What's the novel called?
So it's called Nutcracker. I describe it as a modern day Confederacy of dunces.
Cool.
Hence my asking about a Art of Darkness pod for John Kennedy Toole, because I'm a fan, and I kind of thought like, well, who would Ignatius J. Riley be today? He'd be some edgelord in Brooklyn who's like, totally, unable to interact with people socially, and is, some sort of incel, et cetera, et cetera.
He'd be like a once every 4 months guest on Come Town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Drag this weirdo onto the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, the butt of a Nick Mullen joke.
Yeah, Nick Mullen. He's one of the funniest people alive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Funny.
Nick and Sam Hyde.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Podcasts are great, and the resurgence of comedy as a reactionary medium or a reactionary art form is really outstanding. Like, jokes are right wing now. What? Right. It's just like, what are you talking about? That's how you know you're on the wrong side of things, when humor is like too much for your side to handle. It's like you really got to just unclench your asshole and kind of relax a little bit. I just saw Doug Stanhope at the Mall of America. Fantastic.
Oh, wow.
I love Doug.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were walking to get dinner, and if you've ever been to the Mall of America, I'm not pronouncing it correctly because it's the Mall of America. It's a circle, and so you walk around. You can just walk in endless loops around the mall on like 5-6 levels, right? It's obscene. But we were going to get dinner, and Doug and his entourage were coming the other way, and he had half his face painted. And I was like, "Hey, Doug!" And he goes, "Hey!" And then I'm like, "Happy Halloween!" And then he's walking a few steps behind me, and he's like, "You're going the wrong way." and then in a few more steps, he's like, "Or I'm going the wrong way. I don't know." He was great. He crushed it. And I love that guy. I've seen him now in 4 towns. Just a real, comedian's comedian, and all those podcasts. What an amazing time in terms of we just have lived through this renaissance of like the radio. It's like old timey radio has come back. I love it.
No, that's a whole nother topic. I mean, some people say there's too many podcasts, and when everyone is making a podcast, I sort of get why they say that. And yet I really, really believe in the medium. I mean, starting perhaps with Joe Rogan. I don't even listen to that much Joe Rogan, but nevertheless, he's kind of one of the one of the more mainstream progenitors of this. It's a medium where you really go in depth with a guest, as opposed to everything else in the culture with the internet, but even the way TV has pretty much always been is these quick sound bites. And I think podcasting, it's kind of a rebirth of a certain kind of radio. And it's for people who actually like more in-depth, intellectual, one-on-one, in-depth is the main concept here, beyond the superficial. For people who like that content, I think podcasting has really been a way to take some of that space back, so to speak.
Yeah, I think Rogan is a phenomenon, obviously, and incredible. Yeah. And he's the bro Oprah. He's the bro Oprah.
Oh yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah,
Bro-Oprah.
He's the bro Oprah. And good. We needed it. We need that. He was clearly fulfilling some sort of a need, and acting as a kind of mirror. And I don't tune into him regularly, but if there's a guest who comes on who I want to hear from, if there's a sensational episode, I'll definitely tune in, and it's free. I mean, talk about populism, talk about reaching the masses, and
absolutely.
Yeah, big fan. And look, I would never get discouraged. I mean, we make fun of ourselves a little bit sometimes about, I think we talked about this on the recap episode of Out of Darkness. It's like, it was the beginning of 2020, and we decided there weren't enough podcasts where a couple of guys talk. You have to have a sense of humor about it, right? And these things operate on the Pareto principle. It's like anything else. You don't have an audience, then you break through. And you do something right, you find a format, you find a need. And even if you don't break through to the level of a Rogan or even like one of these tier 2, if you can find your niche and again, move people, what more can you ask for in this world? Yeah.
Absolutely. Finding your audience, finding people who want to hear what you want to say. Like as a writer, that's what that's what you dream for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you fellows are making room for this too, because again, we have this, I think maybe Matthew, you had checked out briefly when I said this, but I told Dan earlier that it's just so bizarre that the idea that to be like a supporter of the arts in America is seen to be somehow like a left-wing thing. It's so strange. What a bizarre way of seeing the world and of seeing politics. And so we've got to change that. That has to, we've got to sort of, it needs to at least be value neutral, not some sort of,
That definitely a part of our mission. And before we wrap, and I do apologize. My computer just froze, and I had to do it was a whole thing. So I didn't mean to check out.
My handler got to you.
Yeah, exactly. They shut me down.
He's saying too much. But he's talking about the mouse.
Matt dispatched him though, as you can see now that he's back.
Situation neutralized. But so apologies if this already got said, but before we wrap, definitely give us the details on where Moderation is premiering virtually again, because it's the December 6th, right?
Yeah, December 6th. It's going to be at moderationplay.com. I keep that updated all the time. My website too, it's kevinkautzman.com. It's KAUTZMAN. .com. I keep that current. I'm on the Bird website. It's just my name. But the details for the Moderation reading are at the Blank Theater's website. You can simply Google that. Or again, if you go to those websites I mentioned, it's there. It's the kind of the number one theatrical thing I have going on right now. And we're doing something a little different with that. We're going to begin rehearsing for it soon. It's going to be a Zoom reading. It will not be a live, we will be streaming it, but it will be a pre-recorded event that we're going to create. And so it's not just going to be people at music stands reading the play. We're going to try to do something that's a little more elevated with it. Two fabulous actors. One is Michael Backinson, who I mentioned before, who worked on Moderation with Spooky Action. Or rather with the Up Theater in Manhattan. He worked on that. And then I have Amanda Forstrom, who's a friend of mine, who worked on the Spooky Action reading, but they've not worked together on the play. So they've both done separate readings of the play publicly prior. Now we've decided, let's put these two together and see what happens. And since she was living in DC, Amanda has moved back to Minnesota, and we're whispering about possibly starting a theater company here back in Minnesota. That's to be determined, and we're thinking about doing it possibly next year, purely for the tax breaks.
Well, we would all benefit from that. So I wish you luck in that, and I hope you do.
Yeah, and look, I mean, if you're really serious about the Killdozer musical and anything else, slide into my DMs. I'm always open. I'm interested in chatting about it. Definitely. I'm halfway into a new play about the opioid crisis and crypto, and a woman who goes to the dark web to hire an assassin to kill a pharmaceutical executive. Oh, wow. Something kind of fun and lighthearted.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can finish that, and I hope you too. I hope I haven't talked too much. I mean, obviously it's a podcast,
not at all.
So it's like the whole.
We want you to talk.
yeah. I hope you two are finding inspiration in your own writing as well. Do you find that working on this show feed like sort of creates a virtuous loop for you with your own work?
I do,
definitely.
Yeah. Go on, man.
So the ideas that get kicked around are definitely an inspiration, and then even just you, Kevin, are much bigger than Dan and I, which is to your credit, but we don't have big audiences for what we're writing, but this show is a reminder that we have a social circle, if not a full-on paying audience. We have at least a social circle of incredibly smart and creative people for whom we can present our work and talk about it. And I think, so both in terms of finding material inspiration for our work, but then also just the social aspect of art, I feel like, is a big part of this podcast.
Yeah, and I would say, see about getting my pal Brad Kelly on at some point.
Brad sent me his book a while ago. Right. I admit I haven't read it. I got a big old stack of books like many of us have. I will read it though, and we will have Brad on.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. You got to have my podcast husband on the show. Yeah, man. But that's great. I really appreciate you guys having me. So I'm happy to come on anytime. Let's. I hope you can make that premiere of Moderation. And
oh yeah,
yes,
yeah. Really enjoyed this, making time to just talk about real things. And yeah, cool.
Yeah, it was
Thanks
great,
so much,
Kevin.
Kevin.
Thank you.
All right, fellas. Take care.
All right. Bye.